All right, good late afternoon, everyone. I am calling to order the meeting of the Election Law Subcommittee. We have two main bills to discuss. Let's start with SB 310, which is Election Law Campaign Finance Entities Termination. From a reading of this bill, what it does is it requires that if a candidate is not a filed candidate, so they're not a candidate. So if a person is not a filed candidate or incumbent in office, that their campaign finance entity would have to terminate and file a final campaign finance report within 8 years after their most recent term in office or the date of the election that they last filed. So this is dealing with when you have to terminate your campaign finance entity. And so under this bill, it would be 8 years after the most recent term in office, if you're no longer in office, or the date of the last election that you ran in. It also requires that 6 months before that termination that the state administrator would send notification to the responsible officer of the campaign entity and make them aware that they must pay out all of their outstanding obligations. They must dispose of any remaining campaign entity assets and terminate their campaign and file a final campaign finance report. Finally, it establishes that the termination of a campaign finance entity does not limit SBE, the state prosecutor or state's attorney, from pursuing an enforcement action or a creditor from bringing action. So basically saying that just because you terminate as an entity, does that mean that SBE can't file some type of action against you if, afterwards they realize that there was something that requires action or that a creditor who wants to bring an action as well. So those are how I understand the main provisions of the bill. Mr. Demarinis or Stan, is there anything to add?
No, you did a great job, Chair. So that was the bill in a nutshell.
Okay, great. Any questions or considerations on this bill?
I have a question.
Yes, Delia Long.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually driving again. So there's any of that money, can that be donated to a charitable cause?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Delia Long. Can we just provide some additional information about what money, how the entity would dispose of the money if they have money in their campaign finance?
I think Jared probably knows this by heart. So
Sure. Yeah. Basically, you can give it to your central committees. You can give it to a board of ed. You can give it to charities. There is the pro rata of contributors that you can return it to. That's a little bit more involved, but you can also give it to the Fair Campaign Finance Fund. It's and this is all in the notice too, Delegate Long, that I have to, if there's anything there, it has to be in accordance with disposal of assets in accordance with the surplus fund law.
Great.
Oh, and you can give it to your legislative caucus committees as well too.
Okay. Thank you. Vice Chair Washington.
Thank you. Is this Senator Pence that we're talking about today, right now?
Not the current bill that we're talking about.
Oh, got it. Okay. Maybe Jared or Stan can answer this. Did we pass a similar bill last year?
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, but this is the third time, actually.
Yeah.
COVID derailed it last year.
Right. The other two times, right, we came out of your committee first and then moved it over to the Senate, and then it just was a sine die, and then COVID last year. So this time I decided to go to the Senate first because I figured you guys have already heard it. So
got it. Okay, appreciate it. No, I just want to make sure that we weren't doing extra things unlike we did the last time. So thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on SB 310.
Move favorable.
Move the amendments, or are there amendments on
No amendments.
Move the bill.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I actually do have a question. for Mr. Demarius that I just remembered I had. In terms of filing a final report, is it just at the next time that a report is due, or is it immediately there's some kind of report that is deemed a final report?
No, it's just on the normal calendar that the next calendar, whatever the next
Okay.
scheduled report is, that's when you would have to file your final report.
And is it called final report in some way, or it's just?
Yes, when you on your form, you'll see it says like file closeout report or file a
Okay.
regular report. They have to file the closeout report.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further discussion? Vice Chair Washington.
Yeah, does this also limit it to the 8 years after 2 terms? Is that what, then you have to close the account? Is that correct?
Correct, right. You have not run for office or served in any capacity for basically 8 years. And, it's just, time to move on.
What if I declared and then withdrew?
Then that would trigger it again because you became a candidate and filed for office. You paid the filing fee. So,
Oh, if you don't pay the filing fee.
right, exactly, yeah.
You'd have to actually file. You couldn't, it wouldn't be enough just to say I'm running.
Right.
But what if I spent money in there? What if I said I'm going to run, I spend money on my campaign and I never file?
If you're not a filed candidate, then that wouldn't restart the 8 years. You have to be a filed candidate. You have to go in and put the money and file a certificate of candidacy.
Cool, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of SB 10, raise your hand or say aye. Delegate Long.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it unanimously. We've moved forward to full committee favorably, SB 310. Right. So moving forward to SB 415 and House Bill 424. Let's take up SB 415 first. I want to note that these bills are cross-filed, so as we're discussing them together, but I'll note, any distinctions in terms of that discussion. So SB 415, Public Financing Act, Matching Fund Revisions, Maryland Fair Elections Act. So this bill makes several reforms to the gubernatorial public financing system. So again, this is the governor's level, governor's races, public financing. So the changes that it makes is that it requires participating candidates to accept only small private contributions from individuals. It also matches the small private contributions with public funds on a sliding scale. It alters the amount of small private contributions a candidate must raise to qualify for the program. And it requires participating candidates to raise small private contributions in order to receive public funds in the general election. It repeals expenditure limits for participating candidates, and it requires the governor to appropriate general funds for the system. So what is basically doing in this bill is making sure that our public matching system actually really focuses in on the small dollar contributions, which is the original intent. So the language of this bill really sort of reinforces that it's a focus on small matching dollars from donors. So it's cleaning up a couple of things to help ensure that we're focused in on those small matching funds. There are amendments to SB 415. The amendments require that small private contributions eligible must be from residents of the state. And it also makes just technical changes as well. So I want to see if Stan if Stan has any additional background to help us on this bill or anything there that I missed.
No, actually, I don't really have anything to add unless there's questions.
All right, wonderful. Are there any questions or discussion on this bill?
If I might,
Sure, I saw Delegate Lasante's hand first, so Delegate Lasante.
Sure, and I don't mind. Just have a quick question about when a candidate basically signs up for this type of campaign financing. Does that in any way have any other impact on, let's say, a PAC that supports them, or the amount of money that let's say a PAC doesn't contribute to the campaign, because I understand the public financing rules if they were contributing to the campaign, but it doesn't preclude a PAC from supporting a campaign or a question directly. Is that correct?
Yeah, there could still be independent expenditures in support of your campaign, yes.
Okay, so in effect, somebody could run for office and say, oh, look, I'm using public financing and use this vehicle. But then there also could be a supporting PAC that does all of that other type of fundraising that supports that candidate or that question.
That's true, but they couldn't coordinate. And if they did, they'd be violating the law.
And what does that mean by coordinate? That's always to me been a real a question that comes up a lot. So could you help me to understand that a little bit better?
Sure. So there's actually a whole statute about this, and it is fairly complicated. But it basically, communications with them about strategy, sharing staff, sharing campaign materials. Those are some of the key factors that go into whether there's a coordination going on. But I'm sure Jared can add to that as well.
Yes, I mean, we have coordinated expenditures where, even if it's a relative of the candidate that goes to the independent expenditure entity, that there's a presumption of coordination there. You see that a lot on the federal side. So we in the last session or so that was prohibited. Sharing of key strategic resources and staffing is also would be deemed to be coordination on that. So these committees have to be completely separate and distinct. Additionally, about I think 6 years ago, we also made that gubernatorial tickets cannot fundraise for other entities themselves because they are receiving public financing. So there are lots of restrictions on these candidates, publicly financed candidates, that would, basically, if you're taking public funds, you're going to run a campaign that is going to be almost isolated from everything else. Like Stan mentioned, it does not preclude independent expenditures from coming in, but Maryland has put up enough, I would say, some barriers there that are I would say, probably some of the best in the nation to really try to ensure that there are no, elements that they would be able to coordinate or secretly try to coordinate with during the campaign. That we've tried to really make independent expenditures independent.
And I should just add that constitutionally they have the right to do that, independent groups, and there's nothing we can do about that.
I was just curious. I mean, particularly with a gubernatorial campaign, obviously a political party, if a gubernatorial candidate wanted to do that, use a type of finance, obviously it's in the best interest of a political party to support their nominee. And so I was just wondering how that coordination or prohibition on coordination really worked in the real world. That was kind of my question. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Delegate Lasante. Delegate Long.
thank you. The question I have is, if this bill passes the way it's done, how would that have been different from the way Governor Hogan actually raised fund? Would it have been harder for him, or about the same, or?
It's a great
Yeah.
question.
Well, I would, I don't know, you don't mind, Chair, I guess it would probably, in the primary, it would be the same. It would be 100% the same because he had a raise. And actually, I think the threshold is a set amount here. So they would have a target that's a lot, that is known beforehand. It's $120,000. And so the current system, it's 10%, and we have to calculate it next year. So if you're thinking about doing public financing, you don't necessarily know what the threshold is until, basically January of next year. So it does play a little into your calculus. So the primary, you have a greater match in this system here because you get 8, 6, and 2 to 1 for a $250 contribution, whereas under the old system that Governor Hogan used, it was a 1-to-1 match of $250. Additionally, there is no expenditure limit that is on here, just what we cap public funds at. So he would probably benefit more. The major difference would be then in the general election, Governor Hogan would have had to go out and continue to fundraise under the new system here because the old system was a grant of the entire expenditure limit. And so, but, candidates at that point there like fundraising and like being in events. So it would still, I would say, I would think that this is the newer model and has proven successful at the county level, in Maryland.
I would just add that to qualify for the program, under this bill, it's 1,500 eligible private contributions, an aggregate total of 120,000, whereas you had to raise small contributions of 280,000 in 2018 to qualify for the program. So this is actually easier to qualify.
Yeah. And to build on Delegate Long's question, I really like real world examples. So Jared, if you can actually walk us through, so let's say right here, right now, I'm declaring, I'm running for governor. Tell me about how this is going to, thank you, Delegate Feldmark, for your support. Tell me.
He wants to be lieutenant governor.
Right, exactly. So the Wilkins Fellmark ticket would come in, and they would file a public financing entity, kind of like your candidate committees, but it would be a separate and distinct one here. It would be a gubernatorial ticket committee. So you would have a chair and a treasurer, just like everything else. You would be together. The committee then would start to, once that occurs, all other committees that you have would be frozen or just inoperable during this time period here. That would be the only vehicle in which you would fundraise into. Then you would go forth and prosper and start raising money of, from individuals of $250 or less. Maryland, with this amendment, Maryland residents, the ones that we have Maryland addresses for, would be matched accordingly. And then that would count towards the qualifying thresholds of that Stan had mentioned of the 120,000 and the dollars needed and 1,500 distinct residents then in the state. But then you can also receive money from individuals outside of Maryland, from New York, California, any person that is eligible to give, they can give. Those are just not matched. Moving forward, but they can help accumulate your total. Once you hit the threshold of 120,000, you would be able to file a campaign finance report with us. You do not have to wait for the normal schedule of time. One of the things that we did through regulations in the past was on the county level as well as in the state level is that we allow more filings, more optional filings for public financing committees because they are needing they want the public funds to flow in and they're not going to want to wait. So once you hit the threshold, you submit it to us, we verify it, we put it in there, and then we notify the comptroller, and the comptroller writes a check, gets deposited right into your account, and thus moves again and keeps on going until election day. So,
Got it.
Yep.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, and I think we'll suspend our campaign and with everyone, see where we go. So, are there any additional questions or comments before we take a motion on the amendments? All right, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion on the amendment to House Bill or Senate Bill 415.
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, the amendments have been moved favorable and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the amendments to SB 415, please raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, the amendments have been adopted. Now, on the bill as amended, a motion.
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, a favorable on SB 415 as amended. Any discussion? Hearing none. On all those in favor of SB 415 as amended, raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, Bob, I think it sounds like you're in favor, and so we would be unanimous. But speak up if that's
I'm good.
okay, great. All right, another unanimous bill. Look, election law.
Hey,
415 favorable.
2 for
Now-
2.
It only took until this part of the session. I'm just kidding. Okay, House Bill 424 is a very similar bill as the cross file by our very own Delegate Feldmark. The amendments conform the bills to be the same, so that it would be the same as the Senate bill that we just moved forward favorably. So I think the amendments would be all the things that I listed previously. Can we take a motion to adopt the amendments to House Bill 424?
Move favorable.
All right, a second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Delegate Washington, Vice Chair Washington.
No, I was going to ask, is this a good bill? But I heard it was because Jeff is on it. So
Excellent bill. Excellent sponsor. Wonderful. So it has been, the amendments have been moved and seconded. I don't think there's any further discussion. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, the amendments have been adopted. On the bill as amended, House Bill 424, a motion.
Move favorable on the bill as amended.
second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 424 as amended, please raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, wonderful. No one opposed. And so another unanimous bill coming out of election law. We move forward. Favorable as amended, House Bill 424. The very last thing on our agenda is I want to flag for the subcommittee that we plan to concur on House Bill 1048, which originally was titled Election Law Permanent Absentee Ballot List. This was the bill that, as it was introduced, it created the permanent absentee ballot list. The Senate took this bill and also added drop boxes to it. So what this bill does is it's similar. It's actually the exact same as SB 683 that we passed last week. So that bill has reached passage. So this is just it's similar exact version that we are now making it, we are now concurring with. So this is the bill that absentee ballot drop boxes, sorry, the absentee ballot. Yeah, the absentee ballot drop boxes and the permanent absentee list. So that's what this bill does. So I just want to flag, we don't need to vote on it in subcommittee, but I'm just letting you all know that we plan to concur with those Senate amendments. So that will come up in full committee. Delegate Lasanti?
I'm just saying that by this time in session, we ought to have a flow chart. We started, we went to that, and now it becomes this.
Exactly, especially with this bill. Yes, it's a bit confusing, but just think.
This is with several bills, not just this.
True, yes.
Hard to follow the bouncing ball.
Right, ballot drop boxes, absentee ballot lists.
Yeah.
Perfect. So with that, I believe that clears the work at our desk. And we, unless there's any further comments or announcements, we are adjourned.
Full voting at 6:30.
Oh, hold up. Yes, full voting is at 6:30. Vice Chair Washington.
I was gonna ask after we go off live.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for